All right, welcome to the Front Row Podcast. This is Coach Mark Gottfried. I'm having an absolute ball having my podcast, and here from Newport Beach, California. Today I've got a phenomenal guest, not only a well-accomplished head basketball coach for many, many, many years, but also just a great friend and a mentor and somebody who's been really good to me over the years. So welcome, Jim Harrick, former national champion coach at UCLA and Rhode Island and Pepperdine and Georgia and all over the place. And but anyway, great to have you on the show. How about this?
Yeah, this is great. This is going to be fun.
So let's go back, Jim. And so for people that, obviously a lot of people they follow, especially here in Southern California and around the world, they follow and understand the national championship at UCLA 1995, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of with you. But let's go way back a little bit. So you grew up in West Virginia, and you and your wife at the time, Sally, who's now been passed away, but you guys make the drive from West Virginia to California. And tell me, for somebody who really doesn't know the story, how big of a deal, how nervous and kind of scared, and kind of what prompted that move from small town West Virginia all the way to Los Angeles?
Well, I had a cousin that lived in West Virginia, and he and his mother, his mother and dad got a divorce, and they was my aunt and uncle, and they moved out here. And he became a basketball player at El Segundo High School and graduated. And his senior year, he came back. It was my senior year in college. He came back on a trip with a buddy, and they stayed at my place. And he kept talking to me about Southern California. And he kept talking to me about Manhattan Beach. And I kept talking. And fast forward, I'm walking through the hall one day, and we come to the placement bureau, and I stop and look. I'm a senior now. It's about to hit the fan. You got to do something. So I'm looking at jobs and looking at this and that, and there was a job in California. Well, I applied for it and ended up getting it. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we decided we were going to do that. And both families were back there, and it was a big, tough decision. Mm-hmm. But 22 and 21, I mean, you're stupid enough to think you know what you're doing. And we got in the car, got married, and got in the car and went to the Grand Canyon and drove cross country. And I taught 4 years in junior high school and ended up getting my master's at SC in education. I was planning on being in education, and I became an assistant basketball coach at Morningside High School. I was a JV coach, JV basketball and JV baseball, Morningside High School, 1964. Now, that's a great story because of the first year John Wooden won a national championship. Wow. Now I'm coaching basketball and instead of just teaching. And, you realize that playing, as you did all your life, and coaching mm-hmm. are two completely different professions. Mm-hmm. So I watched them win a national championship. Oh, boy, I like the way they play. Wow, that's pretty good. And I'm going to start studying him. Started going to practices and going to every clinic, and brought his book, Practical Modern Basketball, mm-hmm. which you read, mm-hmm. I remember, mm-hmm. and tried to learn everything I could about mm-hmm. John Wooden. Mm-hmm. And I started doing his stuff, plays and practice and drills and things as a JV coach, and asking questions and doing things and learning. And 5 years I was a JV coach. Now I've taught 4 years, and 5 years I was JV coach. That's 9 years teaching. Mm-hmm. And I became the head basketball coach at Morningside High School. Well, while we were there, I was with a guy named Lee Smelser, who went out to the College of the Canyons. He was the head coach, and I was the assistant. Mm-hmm. We had Stan Love. And Stan Love went on to Oregon, and Oregon's assistant came down and became UCLA's assistant when I became the head coach at Morningside. We had some unbelievable success. Mm-hmm. 73, we were the number one high school team in America. And he said to me, Frank Arnold was the assistant coach mm-hmm. to John Wooden, said to me, he said, hey, I'm going to get a job from this. This is my turning point in my career. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get a job. He said, I want you to be my assistant. Well, in the interim, he applied for the Utah State job and didn't get it, and called the guy because he knew him. And he said, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for an assistant in Southern California. And Frank and Coach Wooden and Gary Cunningham, who had gone to Inglewood High and Morningside, they were sister schools. We had a nice relationship. All recommended me to Utah State, and I became a college coach. And, I had a nice job morning, so I was head coach and athletic director and chairman of the PE department, and I was making, $25,000. I thought I was tall cotton, and you take a 12.5 cut and pay to go to college. But I went up there and saw the arena, and it can compact your life. Instead of doing a million things, I'm doing one thing.
Right.
And that was really big to me. I was doing one thing, and just basketball. And I like that. And they had a beautiful arena and a great fan base, and it's a marvelous place to coach and go to school. And the valley up there, Cache Valley in Logan, Utah, I just love it. We had 4 great, great years up there. And long story short, Gary Cunningham was John Wooden's assistant. Well, when I used to go to L.A., they had made him the alumni director, which he was before he became alumni director, after John Wooden quit, they made him alumni director. So I'd go down there and I'd take him to lunch. We'd go to lunch together. Well, just friends, because I had run John Wooden's basketball camp, and he'd come out there, and he'd gone to Inglewood, and I was at Morningside, the sister school. So we became really good friends. And 4 years later, the job's open, and Gary Cunningham's going after it. It's a long, long story, but I knew him as well as anybody, and I felt I had a real good shot at it, and ended up getting the job, becoming an assistant. And now I'm saying to myself, if that did that for Frank Arnold, that's going to do that for me too. And that's the first time I ever thought about it. I'm going to got a chance to be a head basketball coach in college. And 2 years later, Gary quit, and they hired Larry Brown. They kept me the job, but Gary had gone ahead and talked to Pepperdine for me, and Denny Crum had gone to Louisville, and Frank Arnold had gone to BYU, and a lot of my friends said, "Hey, wait, and you might be able to get a, i.e., better job than that, or a higher job than that." And I said, "Well, I came out here from West Virginia. My 3 sons were born here. I just kind of loved Los Angeles, and it was home. And I said, I'm going to stay." And took the Pepperdine job, and just had 9 marvelous, marvelous, marvelous years at Pepperdine. Won the league 5 times in 9 years, and 2 NITs. And so we had a nice little run there. And lo and behold, got the UCLA job.
Wow. So 1988, you go from Pepperdine as the head coach to UCLA. And not to bore everybody, but that's when I joined you as a graduate assistant coach. You hired me and brought me on your staff. And I stayed 7 years. We won it in '95, the national championship. It was just a phenomenal run. But I remember you telling me time and time again that the 9 years in high school is where you really, really learned how to coach. Like that was such a good training ground for you. And so many of us, which I never coached in high school, and most of the guys coaching in college now, at least this new generation of guys, obviously they haven't gone that route. Most of the guys just go right into college, maybe as a graduate assistant. But for you, those 9 years, you used to say probably were the best, where it kind of formed you as a coach. Would you agree?
Well, number one, I was an English teacher, and I had to have lesson plans, and I hated it. But when I went to UCLA and learned from John Wooden that you plan every minute of your practice, and that was really part of it. But the second part of it was I was in the classroom, and basketball coach, you are a teacher of basketball. You must have knowledge of the subject matter. You must have methods of how to teach. They learn 20%, 10% when they see it, 20% when they hear it, and 70% when they do it. The laws of learning are explanation, demonstration, correction, and repetition. Those are the laws of learning. So you know knowledge of subject matter, how to teach. You must have discipline and motivation. And I learned all those as an English teacher. especially discipline. In high school and in the English class, and the carryover was so much better. You are a teacher of basketball as a basketball coach. The court's an extension of the classroom, and if you have all those, it really helped me.
I can remember back, Jim, we're on the bus, and I might have been my first or second year, so I was probably 24, 25 years old. I can't remember. But I remember we were up at Cal, and we left the hotel to go over to the gym, I think for a little shoot-around, a little walk-through day of the game. And you sat in the front seat of the bus there, and so I jumped up there and I sat beside you. And I was always trying to learn. I wanted to learn everything I could from you. And I remember asking you, I said, what is the biggest difference between being an assistant coach and being a head coach? And your answer was, you said just like this, you looked right at me and said, it's lonely. And explain that a little bit, because a lot of people don't understand, when you're an assistant coach and you make the jump and become a head coach, now you're the head coach. And, I became a head coach for almost 20 years in college and couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more that most people don't understand how lonely sometimes it is when you're a head coach.
You don't have a lot of people to talk to. Assistants have assistants and players and everybody. You talk to your assistants, but there's times that you need to talk to somebody other than your assistant coach, and you don't have anybody. I always, my wife used to get so mad at me. We'd go to church, and I'd take an envelope and a pencil, and I'd spend all time in church. And I'd have that envelope backwards and forwards filled with thoughts and ideas, I always had it beside my bed at night, and you wake up and you write down things, and your mind as a head coach is just constantly moving and thinking, and what can I do to help my team? What can I do? Did I miss anything? Did I forget anything? Because it's the little things that win the games for you, the little details. And eventually sometimes you come home from a game and you don't have anybody to talk to, and if you had another head coach around, that might be a little different, but you don't. It's oftentimes a very lonely feeling and job.
Right. My 7 years of coaching at UCLA, I tell people all the time, first of all, UCLA to me is one of the most magnificent places I've ever been, and it produces such a great student. I've always believed that, and as the guys we had that played for us during that time, whether it was Don McClain or Tracy Murray and Mitchell Butler, and then some of the younger guys like Toby Bailey and Ed O'Bannon and Charles and Tyus and Cameron Dollar and George. I mean, we can go on and on. There's a bunch of them, but those guys as adults, to me, they just kind of exude class. I don't know. When you're around them, they're just these tremendous young people, and I think the university produces that. Would you agree?
When I became a head basketball coach at Morningside High School, my fifth game, I took my team out to Sherman Oaks and Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks, and we're playing our fifth game. And when I shake our hands, we go out there and jump ball, and I turn around and sit down, and John Wooden's sitting behind me. He had just won his 7th national championship. He's watching me coach my 5th game ever as a head coach. And I became the director of the John Wooden Basketball Club, and that's a whole nother podcast talking there. But he always said, people ask him, how's your team going to be? He says, I'll tell you in about 25 years. And that's exactly the answer to your question right there. You look up now, and Toby Bailey calls me. He's doing very well in the financial world. Don McClain has egressed from one great profession to another great. He's on Fox Sports with the Clippers and Pac-12, and Mitchell Butler's successful, and Ed O'Bannon, I talk to him all the time. He's doing really, really well. And I'll go back to one thing, 25-year anniversary of the national championship team. We had a podcast. One of the great, exciting moments of my life Went about 3 hours with 18 guys from Japan, Taiwan, Czechoslovakia, New York, Seattle.
Right.
And it was a Zoom call, and it was one of the most exciting evenings of my whole life.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the reward you get for coaching. That's the thing that brings you back, the bond that you have with young people, and you know, the bond that we all have with the 95 national championship team can never be broken. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
It is. And there's so many great people. I mean, they're good players, obviously, and they played really well for us, but just great people. And that, to me, stands out probably more than anything.
I noticed you had Jay Billis on your podcast one time. Well, George Zedek is the Jay Billis of Europe. And he played for us, and he's a 3.5 in economics, and has gone over there and has property, and just a fabulous individual. And so they all are in their own certain ways, and couldn't be more proud of some guys.
You know, when I got done playing back in 1987 or 88, and I was playing for the Pistons in the Pro Summer League in Los Angeles, and I remember going back to the hotel, and I was they had signed me as a free agent, and you know, I was a long shot probably to make the team, and I remember this was pre-cell phones, and I go back, and the red blinking lights, you know, was blinking on my phone there, and my mom is in Alabama, and I call back, and she said, "Hey, we just got a phone call from this guy named Jim Harrick, you know, and he just got the UCLA job, and he was trying to track you down." And so the next morning, you know, I just got up and got a taxi. Way back then, there were no Ubers or anything like that. I just got a taxi, went to UCLA's campus. I remember walking in and put my hand out and shook your hand, and I said, "Hey, I'm Mark Gottfried," and you were like, "What are you doing here?" And because I was in LA, you know, I was able to walk in and meet you, and you were hiring your staff, and you were putting together your group, and you know, I was just going to be the graduate assistant, but therein began a relationship in 1988 that you know, still to this day, you know, strong. And I've got a lot of people in my life who I would say have mentored me and people I lean on, but you know, probably outside of my dad and my Uncle Mike, who coached football, I would say you're that guy. You know, you've been there for me, ups and downs and goods and bads, and we've went through a lot together. So we had a great run. 7 years was a phenomenal run, and a national championship in '95 was, you know, only something you dream about.
But you know what, Mark? It's about my 60th year devolved in basketball in some way, and I've had just an absolute magnificent run. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. There's been ups and downs and bumps in the freeway and holes in the road and disappointments, but the journey has been absolutely spectacular. I have a great memory of everything. I'm, you know, not upset or frustrated or anything like that. Very comfortable in my life, and my wife and I have a great time together, and it's just been I enjoy everything. And you know, I listened to Jay Billis's podcast that you had, and he was saying, you asked him that question about what you expect of your kids. You know, you want, but in the end, I'm at that place right now where I make my decisions of where I want to go, what time I want to get up. I don't get up till I do nothing. I tell people, "What do you do?" He said, "What do you do all day?" I said, "Do nothing." I do nothing, and I don't start that till noon. So you get to choose whatever you want to do. You go on a cruise, you go on vacation, you go to a ball game, and you know, I get up and my week's full.
Yeah,
my week's full.
Yeah. Well, you've earned it. You've earned it. All right, so here we go. I'm going to talk about this one real quick. So a lot of people, it's interesting, especially the UCLA fan and even around the country, the basketball fan doesn't really remember it this well. But I want you and I to talk about this for a second. So we win the championship in 1995 in Seattle. We've got an amazing group of guys. But in '94, our sixth year together at UCLA, if I can remember this right, I think we start the year, I think we were 14-0 maybe, ranked number 1 in the country, but we weren't that good. We were okay, and we had a bunch of guys Ty Sidney had some back issues, and we had another player, I think Rodney Zimmerman, had some knee issues. We kind of limped into the finish line that year, and we played Tulsa in Oklahoma City. And Tubby Smith was the coach. They had a really good player named Shea Seals. And I remember like yesterday, the day before the practice, we had like this great practice, man. The shoes were squeaking, man. Guys were zipping around. We're making every shot like, okay, we're ready to go. And we start the game, and I always joke with people and say, by the time I sat down and grabbed my clipboard, I felt like we were down like 18-2. I mean, we were getting smoked by them. They were making every shot. And, I remember game ended, and you made the comment. We were walking across the floor, and you looked over and said, this one might cost us our jobs. And we got back to L.A., from Oklahoma City. And we had a couple of days or weeks where we were pretty nervous, like, okay, are we going to make it here? And I had just bought a house, my first house ever. But we come back, and then the next year we go 31-2 and win it all. And so a lot of people sometimes forget. They look at the 95 team and they say, wow, what a great team. And boy, it came together. Ed O'Bannon was a fifth-year senior, and he'd recovered from the knee surgery he had when he was young. And we added Toby Bailey as a freshman and J.R. Henderson and these guys. But a lot of times people don't know the story behind it, which was really, in my view, the year before. Really the ending kind of propelled us.
Mark, I've not seen anybody, maybe 1 or 2% of the things that ever in the world that you ever have success before adversity in sports. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got to go through it. I mean, it's not, the thing happened to the Dodgers against Houston, mm-hmm. and that propelled them to win it mm-hmm. a couple of years later. And it's just everything I ever look, I see adversity mm-hmm. before any kind of success. Mm-hmm. It's a building block. It makes you stronger, makes you more together. And, we got our brains beat out, but it really brought mm-hmm. our team together mm-hmm. and developed a leadership in Ed O'Bannon mm-hmm. that we had been trying to get mm-hmm. for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So he right then and right there became our leader, mm-hmm. our voice, mm-hmm. the face of our team the next mm-hmm. year. And so adversity helps you. Zimmerman had a mm-hmm. operation mm-hmm. and Edney had a bad back, and Tarver had a high ankle sprain, and
we limped in.
Limped in, and we went 7-7 down the stretch, and then, after the summer, you could almost see it coming. I mean, you can't limp into the tournament and expect to survive.
No, and I can also remember that game in Oklahoma City, because we were down probably, I don't even know what the score was at half, but it was the game. It was one of those games where the game was kind of over.
It was over.
We're over. At halftime, we're done, and we know we're not winning.
Yeah.
But I remember as coaches walked in and we went into a little room there, we could hear our players in the locker room, and that's when the first time, like you just mentioned, where I thought Ed O'Bannon, he rose up at halftime, and he ripped into his teammates. Like we probably never saw Ed do that. I mean, Ed was such a sweet person. He still is. He's just but boy, did he unloaded on them. And probably, like you said, was the beginning of Ed becoming the leader that we all knew he could be, but he just wasn't there yet. But I thought that halftime, in a loss, in a bad loss, an embarrassing loss for all of us, but it was the catalyst probably that propelled him to be that leader.
I remember going home, and the day we got home, the next day he says we're all meeting him in the morning at the track. And they started the next day, and he was the leader of that group, and it's things like that can happen mm-hmm.
For
you. As a coach, you never quit learning, mm-hmm. and I remember. I recruited Ty Sidney, and that's another story, and he came to our school, and we had a clinic, like you have a clinic. We spoke in the morning and the afternoon. All the coaches watch us practice. I'm walking up and down. And Coach Wooden would come to our clinic. He wouldn't come to practice because he felt that would impede me, and But I'm walking up and down, and he says, "Jim, come here." I go over there. He's sitting there. He says, Jim, the little fella talking about Ty Sidney, sees the floor better than anybody you got. Oh, really? Really? So right away, Ty Sedney's in the rotation. And I remember the next year after we won it, we got a kid, a big kid from San Diego, and 6'11", you know.
Jelani McCoy.
We had Omar Gibbons, we had Rodney Zimmerman, and we had Odom. And we're practicing. We have a scrimmage. Blue-white scrimmage. Put the uniforms on, turn the lights on, get in the gym before the season starts. So I'm in the stands watching, and the game's going on, and Toby Bailey, who got 26 in the national championship game, his team's down 15 at half. So I walked down there, and I said, Toby, what is going on? He says, Coach, they got Jelani. Really? So I go back and sit down, and I'll make a decision. Jelani McCoy's our starting guard. And we won the league by 3 games that year.
Right. We had, in that era there, the early 90s, with what we were doing at UCLA and Lute Olson at Arizona, who really had done a phenomenal job. And it really, they had their program going too. But the rivalry between us and UCLA and Arizona. And I would run into guys from here and there, I'm sure you did too, and Damon Stoudemire, who played at Arizona, and all these other guys, and they would all talk about the games of UCLA and Arizona. And, I think one time, Toby Bailey, we were talking about how many pros, or maybe it was Gerald Matkins, how many pros were on the court. I mean, it was like 12 pros between both teams.
6 and 7 8 every game. I get the job at UCLA, and Arizona's coming off a Final Four appearance. Oh, that's a good deal. And it took me a while to figure out, and for a couple of year recruiting. But second year we split with them, and then after that we split with them every time, and then we beat them a couple times, 2 times, and Lute was fabulous coach, fabulous basketball coach. Those were big time guys. I couldn't even talk to you sitting right here.
Too loud.
When we go to Arizona, and
too loud.
And we go to Arizona one time. This is my 3rd or 4th year, and Don McLean and Tracy Murray, and they won 72 straight at home. And we go in there, and McLean smacks me right in the chest. I mean, we're getting up and going on the floor. He hits me right in the chest. He said, "Get me the ball." And, God says, "Get me the ball. You better darn well back it up. You just can't say things like that and not back it up."
Which he did.
He goes for 37, and we win the game.
So when you're coaching at UCLA, and I was with you there for 7 years, and, obviously John Wooden had been retired, and he was so respectful, like you mentioned, where he didn't want to just like come and hover around practice, but he would come to the games, and he was very much a fan. And he's the Wizard of Westwood. I mean, I argue with everybody all the time. You can tell me all you want about greatest coaches of all time, and there's a bunch of great ones out there, but there's him, and then there's everybody else. No one has ever done or will do what he's done, period.
It's funny when I go to this certain state, and you know which one it is, they say, "This guy's the greatest." Right. And you go to this state, and this guy's the greatest coach ever lived. But John Wooden was the greatest teacher of basketball the world's ever known, and his record backs it up, and no one will ever win 10 out of 12, and that's changed. I mean, it wasn't as many teams then as there is now, but it doesn't dispel the fact. He did it 3 times with Jabbar and 2 with Walton. We'll give him those 5, but he did it 5 other times with not normal guys, but pretty darn good players.
So when you're coaching, Jim, at UCLA, and I don't know that I've ever even asked you this before, but were there times when would you have, as a head coach, conversations maybe with Coach Wooden that, obviously that you're not involving all of us, the assistants at the time, but was he, a good encourager? Were there times where he might try to make a point to you, like, "Hey, Jim," were some of those with him? Because you had a great relationship with him. You and him were very close. But how was that as the head coach when you have John Wooden It's not a normal guy sitting over there watching. In other words, at Alabama football, I played during the era of Ray Perkins and Bill Curry as head coaches. That was immediately after Bear Bryant passed away. Well, he passed away. He wasn't there. He wasn't there at the games, sitting there watching. You know, that's a whole different deal. You've got John Wood. So were some of those, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't privy to some of those, obviously, head coach to head coach, obviously head coach to head coach.
Coach, I need some advice. Jim, I don't give advice. But I do give opinions. And from there, I would say, well, when I do this and I do this, you said, well, here's a way we would try to attack that. And I told him many times, Coach, I'd come see you practice, but I'd never seen you practice on late game situations or you're down one or, this special things like this. And he says, Jim, if you don't turn the ball over, you'll never be in that situation. And I learned a great lesson from that because I started the first day talking about turnovers. If you're going to turn it over, you're not going to play, son.
Right.
You got to learn to protect the ball and take care of it. Same thing, fumbling in football. I mean, it's the same situation. Turnovers kill you. You think about March Madness and NCAA tournament. The number one thing is foul shooting in the NCAA tournament, and then certainly turning the ball over and not giving the game away. And you almost knew when Texas Rangers were down to Arizona in the first game of the World Series. They're down down 2 runs, and Corey Seager hits a home run in the bottom of the ninth, and Garcia hits one in the bottom of the 11th. You almost knew that they stole that game, and they're going to steal. You steal one playoff game, you're probably going to win it all. And they stole that game, and you cannot give a game away in the NCAA tournament and expect to win.
At UCLA, the blocking out because I remember having lunch with Ben Howland right when he got the job. I had lunch one time with Steve Alford right when he got the job. And I remember telling those guys, I said, just from my perspective, I was only an assistant at UCLA, but I will tell you the first 27 or 8 games you play every year, they're really exhibition games because the UCLA fan really – they only care about the tournament. You can be 30-0 and lose in the first round to, Northern Arizona or somebody, and you've had an awful year. Even though you're 30-1. And when you were coaching there, how much of that? I know we all block it out. You block it, but you also know it's there. I mean, you block it out, but you know it's there. Was that ever? I mean, how'd you deal with that?
When I got the job, UCLA had been to 3 NCAA tournaments the past 7 years. So they were 4 years, they didn't even make it. So, I put an emphasis in probably going to the NCAA tournament, and we went 8 straight years I was there. So that was a goal that we wanted to do. And once you get in it, then you see how you do. And, a couple of years we were really, really, really good. And a couple of years we went in, we were sick and injured and hurt. And you go in sick, injured, and hurt, and you're going to get beat. And we did. But it's the underdog has such a tremendous advantage in the NCAA tournament. And, I've always said games are hard to win in the NCAA tournament. They're just hard to win. And you better be at your best when your best is needed. It's a great competitive greatness. When the going gets tough, your tough players better get going. And it's a real battle, but boy, there's nice to win games. It's great to win road games. But to win an NCAA tournament game, woo,
a little different.
That.
It's the greatest show on earth.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. I tell people that all the time. So, interestingly, I just last week had a great spent the day with my college basketball coach, Wimp Sanderson. We had a marvelous day, and my college roommate, who we both played in the backcourt together at Alabama, Jim Farmer, we drove to Birmingham and hung out with Coach Sanderson for the day, and it was really a special day. Coach is now 86 years old, and we talked about stories and games and all that. But what was interesting for me, Jim, is when I came to work for you, I had played for him, and one thing I learned was there's always there's more than one way to do something, and he and you were similar in some areas, but then very different in other areas. One is if you were to get with some young coaches nowadays, and the game has changed, and analytics and scouting and all these things now that maybe weren't around, but Coach Sanderson was, almost borderline paranoid, of anybody, figuring out what we were doing, where you were of the opinion of, I don't really care if they know what we're going to do. We're just going to be better than them. We're going to worry about us, and we're not going to worry about them. And I remember when I was in my first year, we were together, and we were playing at Oregon State. And we go in the night before, and we're going to have a little practice up there at Oregon State. And I'm 23 or 4 years old. I'm excited and eager. I'm ready to go, and I'm trying to prove myself to you. And there's some guy, I think he was probably about 90 years old. He was sitting about 40 rows off. And I said, Coach, you want me to go kick that guy out of practice? And you said, why would I do that? He's just up there. Some guy sitting up there. Matter of fact, I think he was asleep the whole practice. But, I came from a camp where, it was that, you're almost paranoid, where you were like, hey, I don't care. If he wants to watch practice, let him watch practice. He's not going to, that has no effect on the game tomorrow. Where did that come from? And if you were talking to a young coach today, a new head coach out there, you want to scout and be prepared, but not, that to you, that you were way more concerned with our own team than you were. You obviously paid attention to who we're playing and what we're going to do and how we're going to play them, but not to the extent I think guys do nowadays.
Well, I'd tell that young coach to teach what you know and know what you teach. But second of all, when we're going to, we do what we call lock and trail, cheek to cheek. Put your cheek on his cheek, which we say in practice, but technically it's lock and trail. So the screen's here, and you gotta trail it, and we're going to send the backside guy out to help you, give you a little help. Well, if you don't do that right, you're going to get beat. You're going to get scored upon. And I had 2 times in my career that guy scored upon me and beat us in a game. And if you do that right, I don't worry about anything. We're going to lose some games, but if we do things right, to play a screen, we step back, slide through, or go over the top of the screen, or switch. Now, depending on the opponent, if you do it the right way we want it done, we're going to be okay. And I was more worried about our execution, our making of foul shots, our no turnovers, our blocking out and getting rebounds, playing hard. That's all I cared about, was us doing things, playing the right way. I don't care what you did. I don't care if you knew what I did. That didn't bother me. I play the first team against the second team every day, and they know what's coming, and they got to guard it. That's what makes it so difficult, because they know what's coming, and they still execute it, and that makes it easier in the game.
And you're saying where you said, easy to scout, hard to beat. Where did you develop that philosophy from?
Well, I got it from Coach Wood. Everything I got from Coach Wood. And even that, he says, Jim, I never worry about the other team. And I worry about our guys getting a hand up on the shot, jumping in the direction of the pass, denying the lead, getting their foot behind, and just the little things that make you win. And I developed that same philosophy. I want us to be good at what we do. There's 2 kinds of coaches, as you know, fundamental and simplistic, and surprise and change. And we're a fundamental and simplistic coach, and we want to be very, very fundamentally sound.
Coach, over the years, you and I both, and we all have, people in all the walks of life had, we've faced some adversity here and there. And one thing, too, that, I tell people all the time, when you've been fired somewhere, that's hard. It hurts bad. But you have always seemed to have like this amazing attitude and very the kind of approach to things where you just bounce back. You're always positive. I've never, ever known you to be somebody who mopes around and sulks and, blames the world and blames everybody else. And you've just been able to, and adversity is something a lot of people go through, and we've done it. But you've always had such an amazing approach, and that's been a tremendous example for a lot of people, but for me as well.
Again, John Woodenism, a man's not a failure till he starts blaming someone else. And I've looked around in my whole career, and of the Lakers, Showtime Lakers. You know, Pat Riley got fired.
Mm-hmm.
John Robinson got fired from SC, the football coach. And I look around, and Jim Boeheim is fired. Jim Calhoun's been fired. Mike Bray at Notre Dame. No one could have done a better job than Notre Dame, Mike Bray. And so it's part of the business when you work for somebody. There's egos involved. There's jealousy. There's money coaches make, and it's a very, very difficult. I've been to really 4 places: Pepperdine, UCLA, Rhode Island, and Georgia. And 2 of the places I work for just absolutely marvelous people. Mm-hmm. And 2 of the places I work for less than marvelous people. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way it went. And I'm not a marvelous guy. And I'm a gray area guy. I made a lot of mistakes and not perfect, but I worked for 2 guys that were just different.
Yeah. And I have too. And it's hard. And sometimes it's hard not to be someone that you complain and you blame and you don't want to, and you just got to rise above it and you hold your head high. And you've been a lot better than me, walking back into some gyms and arenas and, knowing that it's hard. It's hard. I remember when I was coaching at Alabama, I kept trying to get Coach Sanderson to come to games. And, he had a great 12-year run there. And I forgot about this one the other day. He told me, and we were sitting in his living room talking, and he said, a lot of people don't realize, Mark, we played in the SEC championship. The championship game of the SEC tournament, 10 out of 12 years. That's pretty good. Now, you can tell me all you want to tell me now. You can tell me all you want to tell me now. You're coached for 12 years.
You're talking about 12 teams, too.
Yeah, and 10 of those 12 years, and I played 3 of those years for him, but 10 of those, we were in the championship game of the SEC tournament, which there's some pretty good players and pretty good coaches.
I didn't know that. That's so hard to win 3 games in that tournament and get in a championship game. That's unbelievable.
And I think he won it 5 or 6 times out of 12. But, for him to come back to Alabama when I was coaching there, it was hard. To walk back in that arena and, you feel embarrassed and you're just, man, I don't belong here. But you've always kind of been able to do that, and you do it with your head held high. And I think it's a great role model for any, and not just coaches, but people that go through tough times in life. I mean, it happens. It happens in all walks of life. Coaches aren't the only people in the world that have feelings. I mean, everybody in the whole world does, but you have just always been able to do that, and you've done it with great class everywhere you've been.
Well, I just try to be positive about everything, and that's the way I coach my basketball team. And it's always amazing. It's absolutely amazing how a young person's hearing improves when he hears praise. And I learned that from Coach Wooden, and developed it with my team all the time. Praise them, praise them, praise them. And I've tried to do that with my family. I've tried to do that with my wife. I try to do that with people. The waitress at the store, the grocery store guy. It's amazing if you can be positive. And I found out that works. Praise works. And everybody ought to try it because it really does work. You can reprimand followed by praise, and it always works.
How about in hiring people? Now, obviously, you hired me, and I'm thankful and appreciative of that. And not only did you hire me, but we had great success. And then we've always had this just really unbelievable relationship. And I remember getting the job at NC State. I'm in the ACC, and that summer, I think it was my first summer there. Or second summer. I played 1 year, and this was the second year. We were going to Italy to play, or to Spain to play, and you and your new wife had traveled with us. We had just the best time. But always for me, somebody, if I found myself in a pinch, I'm found myself in a tough spot, I'm not sure what really the right thing I need to, how I should handle this. Maybe it's a player, and you're always available to say, this is the way I would look at it, Mark, or here's a thought, or here's a suggestion, and that was always appreciative. But in hiring people, Coach, and I think there's a lot of young coaches and people out there, they hire people all the time, characteristics that you think are important when you're choosing to say, this is the person I'm hiring.
I wish you hadn't asked me that, but I'll answer that for you. I'm very specific in my thinking. I always wanted someone that had a little bit of faith. Kneeling keeps you in good standing with the Lord. You have somebody to talk to, and you believe in something, and you feel something. When I started coaching and going on the road, I would go out and observe guys, and some young guys, some guys that get away from home and not really know how to act. And I wasn't really very big on drinking and smoking, and you could, but I wasn't real big on that. And I was a strike against you, not a strike for you. But that's just personal. No one knew it, but that's just what I did. And some guys didn't know how to act away from home and chase women and do things like that. And I just put guys in a category and kept a little list of guys I would hire, and for the most part, I hired 21 assistant coaches, and they're all turned out to be really good people, and really good assistants, great relationship, and so it's really been good. In fact, I talked to my assistant Tom Asbury's 9 years at Pepperdine. I talked to him on the way down here. So you have those relationships, guys you talk to, and it's funny. My high school team, I got about 5 guys. We have a little thread on the text thread. They thread me all the time, and my wife and I just got back from a cruise. We were in the Cayman Islands. One of my players at Morningside High School was a tour guide down there and took me on a tour. I hadn't seen him in 50 years. But, that's the kind of thing I like, to have those relationships and the bond that you build with young people.
I remember 1988. I'm brand new. I'm hired at UCLA as the graduate assistant coach. I'm going to go to graduate school, and it's in the real world. It's basically like an intern. You're there and you're learning, and I'm still going to school. But I remember one of the first days in your office, you looked right at me, and I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do here today? And you said, Mark, if I have to tell you what to do every day, I've hired the wrong guy. And what it did, though, it made me realize that I, as an assistant coach, I have to find all the possible ways I can help. I need to ask an assistant coach, what can I do to help you today? I don't care if you want me to stuff an envelope, or I don't care what it is. What can I do to help? And I'm going to make myself all day long find things that are going to be, hopefully help us become better, but where I can help everybody else. And I used that so many times with guys I would hire, when I became a head coach. Like, if I have to tell you what to do every day, I've hired the wrong guy. And it's that kind of being industrious, it's being resourceful, it's taking the initiative, and as opposed to somebody standing over there, not doing anything with their hands in their pockets.
Kobe Bryant was the greatest one of all time. Work at your craft, improve at your craft every single day, and I tried to do that. And I tried to coach. Not only am I the coach of our basketball team, but I'm the coach of our assistant coaches also. And I try to guide them, and I make a little list of things that you should do and give it to you at the beginning of the year. These are your responsibilities. And I said, I don't want to have to tell you what to do every day. Here's your assignments. And if you can't get them done, then I've hired the wrong guy.
Right.
But that's part of your learning too, and teaching, and give you everything we've got, and try to make a list of what athletic directors look for in an assistant coach, and what the athletic director's job, and so you understand a little bit like that, and I always wanted to pepper my assistants with things like that. But you're coaching them too.
Right. Talk to me about which I've learned so much from you over the years, but how important with your coaches, assistant coaches, is the word loyalty?
To me, it's probably number one of all time. I don't care what goes on, everything. You got to be loyal to the guy that hired you. And if you can't be that, then you need to quit. You need to step away. You know, I've had to let a couple guys go. Probably out of the 21 guys that I hired in my career, one I don't speak to, and it all gets back to being disloyal. And you know, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And like you teach about your team, if everybody's together, it's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. It's amazing when you're together on the court, if we share the ball and help each other and pick each other up and support each other and cheer for each other and win together and lose together, and everybody's together. And it's the same thing on a coaching staff. You got to be that way, and you can't go home at night and say, "Why did that head coach do that?" I mean, you just can't do that. And you know, I always had a rule. We're in this meeting with this board. You know, we plan our practice every day, and you can say anything you want to. You can call me any name you want to call me. You can say I'm crazy, I'm stupid, you know, blah, 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 whatever you want to say. But once we leave that room, we're loyal to each other, and we support each other, and we help each other. And most of all, Mark, we praise each other. And if you praise each other around to your media, around to your boosters, around to your fans, what can happen? It'll go all the way around the country. And by the Final Four time, it'll come back to you and say, boy, he's a good assistant. Because I'd go out and say, boy, Mark Gottfried, he's a great assistant, great assistant. By the time I get to the Final Four, somebody'd walk up to me and say, boy, Mark Gottfried, yeah, he's a great assistant. So it just, praise works.
You know, I was always so appreciative, Coach, of, I think probably my second or third year, I had to be like 25 or 6 years old, and we were at a Final Four in Denver, and the job at the head coaching job at the University of Idaho was open, and I was one of your assistants. And I remember sitting in the hotel room with you, and you were on the phone with the athletic director, and you praised me so much, I was like uncomfortable. I'm like I feel like. But I learned how hard you went to bat for me, you know, and I ended up not taking that job and, you know, that type of thing. But it was a great lesson for me as a head coach when my assistant coaches had opportunities to become head coaches, which you want them to do and advance themselves, where I was able to go back and remember how you praised me to others, which now I want to do that for my assistants. I want to now praise them and build them up and help them along their path.
I had the great privilege of moving 12 assistant coaches into Division I head coaching jobs. And I was proud of that because that's kind of what you want to do. Not besides others being assistants and all that. And I have some young guys right now out there that played for me that are still assistants, and one's a head coach at Georgia State, Jonas Hayes, and you know, they call me all the time, so that's part of it.
Coach, you had 3 boys. We lost one, Jim Jr., within this past year. It was obviously heartbreaking for all of us, and I'm sure for you just devastating. It's hard. But growing up and when all 3 of your boys were young, and I've got 4 boys, 1 daughter, but for you, I always have fun asking this question, and because the answers are so interesting for me. And I always ask, you know, people as, you know, if you could gift your children characteristics, if you could just gift them, what would they be?
Number 1, I want my sons to be able to communicate their thoughts and ideas to others. I've always felt if you can't communicate, you're going to be lost. I can talk to the president of the school and the janitor of the school, and you can talk to the CEO and the lowest employee and still be equal with them. Number 2, I want a B student who has A character rather than an A student who has B character. No lying, stealing, cheating, drinking, smoking, or wacky tobacco, I call it. Smoking, no. I mean, I just don't want that. I just don't want that. And luckily, I haven't faced any of that kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure my boys had a few tall boys here and there, but otherwise, it was really pretty good. And third, it's really hard to define, but I want them to have great work ethic. And I hope that they watched me, because I hope that I had great work ethic and passed that along to them. And, also pass along the fact that they can learn so much from you when you show them how much you love their mother. It's a real strong point. But I want them to communicate to lots of others. I'd rather have a B student who has A character rather than A student who has B character. I want to have great work ethic.
Well said. Well, Coach, it's been fun. You and I have had, we could talk for 100 hours. We could go back over every story of games and, all that. But I've always appreciated you for what you've done for me and helped me along my path and my journey. I tell people all the time, I came to Los Angeles in 1988. I didn't know a human being in the state of California other than you, and I had just met you. And that time I was married and young, and I think for 7 years that I worked for you, I'm pretty confident that every Thanksgiving and every Christmas we were at your house with your family, and you brought us in like family. And then throughout my entire career, I don't know that I've had a bigger supporter, like I mentioned, outside of maybe my parents and my uncle, and than you have. So I've got a lot of respect and appreciation for you. But today was a lot of fun. It was great, and we'll do it again.
You were a top assistant for us, and I respect that and appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. All right, thank you.